Every new game dev has this dream of creating a 3D game world. And naturally, starting a 3D game involves using a player character. Part of creating a well game is that the functionality works well. The player character is supposed to feel proper. And there's so many videos out there that tell you how to quickly create a player character, but many of them are not feeling smooth. There's always this one issue, for example, the player not jumping properly. Like, what is this moon jump gravity? So in this video, I'm gonna take you along my journey of how I finally created a proper player character, problems that I faced along the way, and how you can create one in an efficient way as well. Let's dive right in. So remember, my first 3D project was actually a tutorial from Brackeys at that time. It's an awesome tutorial and you'll learn the basics of game development and 3D at the same time, but it's not really a working player character controller. It's more of a cube and you just make it go left and right. What I'm talking about though is creating a proper player controller. So I sat down and tried to do it before, but it was a hassle. You know, there's stuff that doesn't work, and if you're just starting out and you're doing 3D game dev and then there's a problem, it's just too much to handle. Starting out and doing 2D is just easier. Nevertheless, I sat down and researched some YouTube videos that could help me create a proper 3D player character controller. And then I found this great tutorial by some German guy, I believe, and his name is Dave Game Development. Link is in the description. And he actually did an amazing tutorial on how to do a player character controller. Also, with previously failed attempts now under my belt, I was now feeling good to tackle the player controller aspect once again. So I sat down and got to work. I followed Dave the game dev and it seemed pretty good. I was finally genuinely able to understand what I was programming. Because the first time I was trying to do a 3D player controller, it was a bit over my head. But after doing some 2D game development and learning some other stuff, I was now kind of grasping what I was doing. So it really felt like all of this was going great. But then problems arose. The player character would suddenly fall over for no reason. If I pressed left and right, he would go front and back. It just didn't make sense. And finally, I copied the jump variables from the tutorial, but it just felt like he was jumping on the moon. And some of these problems may be obvious to you, but as a beginner game dev, these problems, they pull at you. And you're not as well versed at problem solving as you might be if you have been game developing for longer. I remember when I first started out, the console giving a warning was really intimidating me. It took me some time to figure out the console giving a warning is a nice tool to look where in the code I made an error. But just as that took some time, it also tore at me that there was once again errors in my 3D game character code. And this can really be a setback. Luckily though, I also did a character controller in 2D before, and what I was missing was freezing the rigid body rotations at the start of the script. This is something really easy, but it can really go on your nerves if you're right in programming. Next was something that was not so easy. Why would the character go back and forth if I would press right and left? So I went back to the script and I checked for where I put the inputs for the player movement. So I just did a dumb mistake. For the inputs for left and right, I made them affect the forward vector, which is obviously wrong. This vector is for forward and backward. We want it to affect the vector.right so that we can make the player go left and right if we press the correlating buttons. So I finally made the player character work. However, I was still jumping as if I was on the moon. And this is something that was really annoying because Unity is supposed to simulate real-world physics. Unity has set the gravity to -9.81, which approximates Earth standards. However, it still felt like my character was jumping on the moon. And this was so annoying. And I remember back in the day, I wouldn't have been able to solve that. But now I was capable because previous coding experiences taught me that if I use the rigid body.velocity and say that if the velocity on the y is smaller than 0, so basically if the character is falling, then I could add extra gravity just targeting the player and thereby making his jump be smoother because I don't want the player to feel like he's flying around when he's jumping. And thereby I could keep the standard settings for gravity for all the other objects in Unity, but I could have the player react in a smoother way just specific to him that would make the player's feeling much better. Man, and I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of what I did here. The player character is now finally working, so now I can finally use this player character to build an epic 3D game world. If you're new, I would consider making 2D games first, and then if you become a little bit more familiar, then you try to tackle the bigger fish. Then you go for the player character. At this point, I would also like to remind you that it would be awesome if you would subscribe. This is a new channel, and this is my third video now, so any support is highly appreciated, and consider liking because it would help me a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.